Welcome back to Money Matters. I'm David Crowell from Mortgage Network, and I'm standing right next to Emily Johnson from Polaris
close,
Capital.
Yeah.
And we're picking up the second half of the show. We were talking about your reaction as a daily witness to the turbulence in the stock markets and the bond markets. You're a daily witness to it. You're an investor, and what should your reaction be, and how does that play into who you are, what your plan is, where you are in your life, and so forth. I wanted to, in the second half, go to concrete examples. Folks, I'm lending money all day. Emily's investing money all day. Give you a couple of concrete examples of just how profoundly important it is to evaluate who you are and what your objectives are. The market being then a secondary tool for achieving your objectives. But your objectives, articulating them and getting them straight in your head are the most important things. So let me lead off with an example. If you're a school teacher, school teaching couple from Pennsylvania, and one of you is just retired with a $80,000 retirement package, and the other is about to retire maybe 6 months or 12 months from now with another $70,000 retirement package. That's $150,000 a year in retirement.
And you should consider yourself
income.
lucky, because that does not happen very often.
Makes you a rarity.
Yes.
Makes you a rarity. It's $150,000. Now, I have such a client, and recently I had a second client whose combined retirement income, 2 teaching positions, was just under $200,000. Now, Emily, if you had a portfolio for the $200,000 person, what would it take, conservatively invested in income, these are folks who are 65 years old, to produce $200,000 of income a year?
I'm confused. So you're saying that
so
they have...
if they came to you, if they had a stock portfolio, not a not a pension.
Not a pension. Oh, okay.
And they had a stock portfolio, how much? What's the size of the portfolio that you would need in order to produce $200,000 a year for them?
I mean, off the cuff, you could say about 5% would be the return. I mean, that's an off the cuff though, and the first questions are going to be: are these fixed expenses? Are they discretionary expenses? Are they, are they?
I want you to generate me $200,000 of income.
Well, so the answer is you could do it with...
How much do I have to give you into the investment account in order for you to produce $200,000?
So I'm not being circular, but the answer is, how much risk are you willing to take? Because when
this is a real case,
right?
And that's why it's bouncing around
That's
here.
the problem when we're led by expenses first, or led by desired income first, and not led by risk. So yes, our objective is 200, and this is not circular, but the answer is, if somebody came to me with $200,000 and said, I want to have $200,000 a year in income, I'd say, sweet, we can do that for 1 year. But then the next question is going to be, do you want this from now till kingdom come?
I'm going to rephrase it to Emily. I have a vast sum over here in my right pocket. I'm going to transfer a portion of that sum to you. And I want $200,000 a year in income.
Okay.
And I want it to be low risk, because I'm healthy and I'm going to live another 30 years.
You want low risk, and let me guess, low risk, 8% return forever. And
I don't know what my rate of return. You notice how a financial advisor immediately goes to rate of return in its relationship to risk. This is exactly what they do. This is how they must think. Rate of return in relationship to risk. I as the example maker am simply saying, I need a couple of $100,000 a year on which to live.
And what happens is you actually end up tranching or batching the funds into different rates of risk based on where the market is and what the client needs, because some of that money can't actually be invested at high risk, or can't be invested in these days even for much of return at all, because that might be the funds that we need to pull income from for the first few years if we do have a shoddy market. The second portion would be invested for some form of moderate income. These days, that ain't much. If we're looking for something even higher, we're going to be taking a lot of risk. And most clients, despite, if you really ask most clients, most clients are quite risk averse. Even if they come in saying, well, you know, I should be getting probably what, like average 8%. I mean, that's normal. I hear that all the time, especially from baby boomers, from Gen Xers, whatever. That's because that's sort of what the norm is. That's not really the norm anymore, at least not in the short term. So the answer is you'd actually end up batching the funds, some for very little return, some for some marginal, right now call it 3% or so, and then some would actually be invested where you could actually assume that 8-9% return over the course of a 15-20 year period, in which case you're going to have an average. And again, I'm not trying to circumvent it, but the answer is going to be based on what the client can stomach.
And I think that the answer that we're coming to is that low risk level, medium risk level, high risk level mixed together equals a balanced portfolio. We're probably going to have to give Emily somewhere around $4 million to invest in order to have a $200,000 a year return. However, if we exercise a different objective, completely different objective, which is the pine box objective, which is to say, I'm going to give you X amount of money, I want $200,000 a year back, but I'm perfectly happy that the day I turn 90, for there to be not a penny left. Not a penny left. My sons and daughters will look after me. I have a plan B, or I have a long-term care benefit policy or some such thing. How much will I need if it's 200 a year run to zero? How much will I need if it's 200 years preserving the principal? Probably around $4 million to preserve the principal, right. Probably around $3 million if you run it to zero. Something like that. And
sometimes we get the flip of that, where somebody does, the client comes in, as my dad says, patient presents. In this case, client presents with a few $1 million in the bank in various forms, IRAs, maybe an annuity, investment accounts, just some variation on that theme. House may be paid for, moderate mortgage, something like that. And they'll say, I'm looking to generate 8%. And you look, and then we talk to them about their expenses, and their expenses are negligible, which is interesting. I mean, here in Hilton Head, you see both extremes. You see people that live very frugally, that still, are members of the club, play golf, whatever. They live, but they live very frugally, and then and they may have plenty of means. And then you see folks that live very extravagantly, and it makes me stressed to try to figure out how to make that happen. So when somebody walks in the door and says, I'd like to achieve 8% return, and yet they're only spending $100,000 a year, I said, why? It's going to keep you up at night. It's going to give you heart palpitations. It's probably going to shorten your lifespan, and you don't need to. I'm not trying to pass the buck or take stress off of my plate either. I'm just saying, why are we trying to achieve that if our objective is really the $100,000 versus the $400,000?
That's correct.
And so again, managing to that objective is the goal, and it's not to try to take the sex appeal out of the portfolio. And managing to the objective stated the way that Emily did has another complete restatement that comes to the same thing. Why are you looking at an $850,000 house when you could just be just as happy in a $550,000 house? Why are you looking at a $550,000 house when you could be just as happy in a $350,000 condominium with extra trips to your grandkids? Why are you, in other words, the lifestyle, the budget, the amount of money that's being spent, the amount of money that's required to be spent, all of those absolutely dictate the objective, and in turn dictate the amount of risk that needs to be taken with the portfolio. Which is identical to what you're actually doing when you look at your mortgage, not to just keep putting it back on you, but it's the same thing. I mean, are you looking to have a tax advantage? Are you looking to have, what is the purpose of having the leverage that you decide to assume? And I tend to think it's a good thing for most people. However, there are folks that feel very strongly, so it's a risk.
We have seen in the last several years since the major recession, we've seen the level of mortgages taken by people in their 60s and 70s go down dramatically. Leverage going away, see, I don't have the stat, but I believe that it is somewhere around 65% leverage as opposed to 75, 80, or 85% leverage, which is quite remarkable
And
reduction.
still 30-year mortgages, typically?
Still 30-year mortgages.
Why not?
Why not? Thank you very much. This is David Crowell and Emily Johnson for Money Matters, and we'll
See you next week.
see you next week.
Thank you.